can play a musical instrument of some sort and just entertain them. Because otherwise it's just quiet. It's always quiet. So, the only sounds you'll hear, often is like a woman humming, or a man humming even, or a man whistling, but otherwise, because that's the only stuff you can do without your hands, because your hands are always busy. Your hands are always being worked. These people are just living very rough lives, it's kind of scraping by, they say, but yeah, that's what it is. You're just scraping, That's like a lot of what it is. You just, with your bare hands, with your fingernails, with your weapon, or not your weapons, but with your tools, your daily tools. What is a broom? It's scraping away that surface, just like removing that top layer of dust and dirt, and just kicking out of the house. And same with men, because they're just, scraping away at the earth with their oxen, their tools, and their plows. And you're just, scraping away in battle. You're scraping, you're fighting, and you get drunk and you fight, you put on your armor and you spar, and then you go out and kill somebody. That's the way of life. And that's the way of the soldier. That's the way of, just a sword for hire. Mercenary. That's what these guys are. That's who they are. And these guys, that's a choice in life. They said, this is the lifestyle you're going to have to lead. You're gonna drink. You're gonna screw women. You're gonna kill people, and you're probably gonna get killed. And it's just a life you're gonna choose. And it's hard. What do? Can you accept that? And these kids are just sitting there and like, well, we want to do something here. Because this is the conversation you can imagine would happen between, like, say, Jim and, or like the gist of the conversation. By the way, I should just stick to the omniscient third person. This kind of conversation that would occur between them in the consciousness is that what are you going to do in this this world? What are you going to do in this life? Because the other thing is that these kids are alive, and also these guys recognize, hey, these kids are pretty healthy. They don't got scars on their face. They don't have pock marks, scabs. They don't have deformities. They look pretty good. These kids are nerds. They got acne. And Matt's developing facial hair, but otherwise, they're just, like scrawny kids, and they're not considered that attractive by the women of Earth, And it's just like, or the girls at their high school, they're nerds, and it happens, they're like, wow, damn. So they got nothing, and they're like, well, but they go to the world, they actually look all right. They look okay for themselves, they've done pretty good for themselves. They've eaten well, too. And they're like, well, we don't know. They don't, they wouldn't know what to do, other than, well, they kind of just come here and drink it and talk to this, barkeep. And the guy's like, well, you guys got to decide something, man. There's more to life than just sitting here and drinking. That's what I'm just doing. But it's cool when you come by and you want, give me your money, but otherwise, sorry, doing the character again, but you got to figure out what you can do with your life. Where are you going to go? What's going to happen in your life? It's like, if you want land, you got to go out and cut it. You got to chop down some trees and start making yourself some farmland. Go for that. This means you got to walk farther out of town. But otherwise, you can try trading. We got a caravan park right over there. But no, they're not really hiring. But they'll take on tent guys, mercenaries, guards. And it doesn't matter how skilled you are sometimes. It's just they just need bodies. They just need guys to go along. Guys to either haul or carry or just really just be somebody holding their stick and a shield and looking mean. And yeah, that's what all right. Well, that's what we'll do. We'll just be guards. We'll just walk around. And that's when they decided, all right. Well, when break comes up in November, that's where we'll go. We'll walk around. Let's check the place out. Because otherwise, we're just sitting here in this town. And we got to walk from outside of town, from that cave, out to here. Let's do something else, Let's get some horses, too, And all right, yeah. So they come, that's what they decide. Well, we got to get ready for that. So what are we going to do? Well, we got to get clothing of the place. We got to dress up. We got to, get used to the food here. We got to, bring our own food. We got to, we got to get ready for this stuff. We got to, plan it out. We got to figure out how we're going to get away from our parents. We'll write them letters. And they, what else? Well, it's like, they got their boots, and they like, all right, well, we got some, we got to get some weapons too, because everybody here's got a knife, knows how to use it too, uses it constantly. I was cleaning my nails with my knife the other day, but it's just, it's just something you get used to. It's like it's part of it's an extension of yourself. And at an early, even at a young age, that's what a knife is. Because even at a young age, you have a knife, and you're going to learn early on, don't fuck with it. Don't fuck with knives. It's if you want to get stabbed, if you want to stab yourself, you cut yourself. So just don't, it's like with guns. You just don't fuck with guns. But that's what you tell the kid. Like, bring it out. Like, look, see this gun? Just don't touch the gun. All right, no matter what. Even if you're just playing around. All right, don't even tell anybody where it's at either. So that's something else. If you have friends over there, don't tell them where your gun is at. Okay, so you can get stolen, man. Bad stuff can happen with that gun. So trust me on that. As far as anybody asks, you have no idea if your dad has a gun or not. That's the only answer you give. I have no idea if he does or not. That's the best answer to give. So, but anyways, they can't take guns to this place either. That's the sucky part. And Jim was kind of like, well, if we had guns, but then they realized because they were asking, they kind of broached the subject of guns, eventually, but it's more like they couldn't tell the guy what they had, but they would ask themselves like, well, tell us about this place. What's here? What can we see? Like, are there castles? Like, oh yeah, there's castles all around. And like, cool. Well, where's the closest one? Like, well, you got to travel, you got to walk, or rent a horse and go. Like, all right. But, so cool, we can see some castles. Yeah, you can see some castles, see forts, you see, like, battle-sized battlefields. You see anything, everything. Just keep walking, you see a port town. Go check out the port towns. So those places are live, man. Full of people, and there's, like, just tons of whores. And just, everything, man. Like, whores? Yeah, dude, And it's like, yeah, dude, let's go. Because, this place doesn't have a whorehouse, man. Let's go find a place, who knows? We're legal, and they're like, but dude, man, but they got STDs and stuff. Like, I'll just slip a condom on you, she won't see it, we'll be fine, And, besides, all they care about is just me going in and out, and they're not even going to notice, they'll be fine. But anyways, because see, that's the other thing, like, I'm trying to write a story that's realistic, by the way, it's like, this is a sandbox environment. You create a character, you let it loose in there. That's the way George R.R. Martin does it. My man writes awesome stuff. I can't hope to get up to his level. So, I hope I can, at least that's the bar that's set. I need to reach and achieve. If I can write as good as him, hell yeah. But otherwise, I'm trying, So that's the kind of style I'm going for. And then like Glen Cook even. Oh man. But anyways, but I like Glen Cook, but at the same time, like, I wish he was a bit more descriptive about stuff. Because he just kind of glosses over stuff. So with my stuff, I don't gloss over. I try not to gloss over anything. So if it's not mentioned for a reason. But like, you're going to hear why. So that's why they get diarrhea and they get sick and stuff. And they want to drink. But otherwise, whatever. It's just what they do. And they also realize, well, they have to go home. Because sometimes the parents get a little suspicious. And yeah. They just realize, we're just not going to get drunk. We're just going to hide out in our rooms and stuff. Go home, go right to bed. So that way you don't have to mess with the parents. That's the best part. And but they ask the guys, like, well, what can we see? What's here? And they're like, well, there's, sometimes you run across a magician, and if they need money, they'll put on a show. They, put on a show like, oh yeah, dude, they'll make fireballs appear. They'll like, they'll like throw stuff up in the air, and like it'll do whatever. Like, they'll take the stuff, and they'll fold it up in a certain way, right? And it's kind of like bark, and you just kind of fold it, right? And you throw it through the air, and it kind of flies like a bird, but it kind of some of it kind of sink, but otherwise it flies. You're like, wait, those are paper airplanes. It's like, yeah, oh, that's what we call it, paper. And it's like, airplanes. And like, oh, I'm sorry, I meant paper birds, right? Paper birds. Yeah, paper birds. Okay. So, all right, and they realize, ooh, don't say stuff, because you don't want to stand out. So that's the other thing they realize, that, you just don't stand out in this place. Just totally